Alright, so this is where we left off last time. And I know the last few minutes I went really fast and I didn't get a chance to explain to you what's going on, but today I want to cover again the way how you can read data and output data to the form. Now this is very different from what we learned in the past. When we did the reading input and outputting in the console-based application, you realize that everything happened sequentially, right, from the top to bottom, and you can't interact with two events at the same time. It's just one at a time. This is very different now because now we're dealing with GUI applications. So every GUI applications that you come to learn in the future, even like web pages, right, or a game application, if you are familiar with Unity or any of the GUI applications, you'll see that most of these are what's called event-driven applications. That means things do not happen sequentially because everything you see in the form here is waiting for an event to occur. An event is a special action that is caused by a user or some other applications, and these are things like a click on a button, or you move your mouse on the screen here is an event. You type something on a keyboard, you press a button, all those are events. So there are a lot of kinds of events. And so now when you're dealing with GUI applications, nothing happens until an event is taking place, okay? So that means things can happen in any order, it doesn't matter, and it just depends on the user's interaction with the form, okay? So it's very different now. And also when you read data, just remember that data can be coming from many places. In this example here, we had only one place to input data. I mean, it doesn't mean that that's the only place. It could be somewhere else too. But for the sake of this example and the future application that we'll be building, all inputs will basically coming from a form, such as this box here. Okay, so this is your form, the interface that will read data, and it's also usually the interface that will be displaying the data. So you can think of this form here like the console, okay? Except now you can read data in many places, and you can output to many places as well. And that's the fun part when you start coding. Okay, so we learned last time that we built this form, and we used this text box here. As you can see, each object, each element, or we call this control, that you put on this form is an object. And so when you put something on the form here, the first thing you should do is go ahead and then give it a name. All right, give it a unique name. So I mean, you don't have to do this, but usually if you follow this convention, this is really helpful. Label will be LBL under what that label is about. The button is BTN, and then the name of the button. One could be submit, another could be click or OK, right? Things like that. And so when you look at this form here, we will say that this text box here will receive the input, and then when we type something here, then we're going to collect the data or whatever you type in this form box to the code. Okay, so we do that by clicking this submit button. So when you click the submit button, we're going to do the code behind the scene, and then we'll process the data in the back end, and then we'll output it back to the same form here. So we decided that we're going to put it down here where this little bracket is. This is going to be the output, and we have a label here as well. As you can see, I called it LPL output message. Okay, and make that unique. That is the variable name for this object. So then when we code in the back end, you basically just double click this button here, right? We double click that button, and right away it takes us right into the code view, and this code view here gives us the actual function that is needed. So the functioning is defaulted to the name of our button. We call it BTN submit before, right? And so it renamed it to a capital B because that is the convention how you create a function, right? Capital B, and then it adds the underscore click, just to tell you that this is a click event. Okay, so this button here responds to a click event, and for now we could ignore the things inside here. So leave it as is, just don't touch them. And then you are presented with a blank space in here, and we added two things in here. Okay, the first one here is called the input. Remember, we re-input from the console. You will do something like this, right? You do console.read. You can still do it, but we're not going to do that in here. So you read the console, and then you assign that to like string s, right? The same idea. Okay, same idea, except this time we're reading from a form. So we're going to read from the text box. We called it txt input. Okay. So I'm going to turn this off here so you can understand where the input is coming from. This txt input is, I'm going to lock this one so you can see both of them. If you look at the design, is referring to this txt input here. So you have to be very specific to read what the data is coming from. Okay, because later on you may have 3 or 4 or 10 of these input boxes, and you need to know where is it coming from, which is why I recommended that you name your objects with a very meaningful name. This one here is just one, so I just call it txt input. But you could call later on, you say txt first name, txt last name, txt email, things like that, right? So once you name like that, then you can see that in your code you can easily determine where they're coming from. Okay, so the text box has an object, has a property called text. Okay, this text here, I go back again. If I click on the text box, you will see, I showed you the other day that if you scroll down to the T area on the text, there is a box here for putting data. Okay, that is where the data is coming from, to that text box property. So when I type something here, right, it shows up right here. So when the user types it, it goes through this property here as well. And that is why when you do in the code, you do a .text to read from that property. Okay, so probably 90 or 99% of the time you'll be doing something like this. So I'm reading from the text box called txt input, and then from that property called text. Okay, so the text here gives you something, gives you a clue, right? It tells you that, again, everything comes in as string. Okay, text. That's why it's called a text box. Text only. Even if you put a number, it's still going to be text. Okay, so I read it as a text. I would assign that input to the left of this operator, which is the variable called word. And because this is a text and this is a text string, in the string they work out pretty nicely, so no conversion needed. So once I got the word assigned to a new text, I can then print it out. So this is the output here. Okay, so again, we're not outputting to the console, we're outputting to an object. And if you look at this, this is the label, output message, again, .text, right? So you're not going to do something like this. It's not going to work. Because this is the object we created, it needs to go into the property called text. So it will show up there, and so on. Very similar to this as well. Same thing. And then we'll assign the new word to the label text, and then it just displays right there on the form, right in this spot here. Okay, so that's why when I save this and you run, just press Control F5 or go to a debug, run without debug. It's faster. That's why when you type something here and you click submit, it runs the code and outputs right back to this label right here. Okay, so that's how you do it. Input goes from here, output down here. Now, also remember that this one has a dot text property. This one has a text property. The button has it too, right? Properties called text. So all these most of these objects have a dot text property. So that means if you look in the code, any object that has a dot text, you can output to. Okay, and you can also read from. So for example, I could put the same text right back to this input here. So I could say, okay, down here, I'm going to go and then put txt input dot text. So I'm going to replace whatever I typed there with this new text. I could use the same word, and then maybe plus another special text, hello world, right? Something like that. So from here, when you click the button, things will happen sequentially inside this function. It will look at line 22, 23. Okay, read that from the input, write that to the output, and then write that out to the output as well, back to where I got the input from. Okay, because they don't occur at the same time. It's sequentially from here, right? So if I save this now and run again, you'll see that if I type hello here, and if I click submit, it goes to both places, right? Hello world, and then hello here, because my string only says word only for the label, but the word plus world to the text box here. So you can see how easy this is, and sometimes it can be confusing, and you might have an error because it doesn't give you any, syntax error, you have a logic error. You can also replace the button instead of saying submit, after I click submit, I want to change this submit to something else. So you can do that as well. And that's just very simple again. You go to the btn button dot text, say done, right? Something like that. So you can see there's a lot of fun doing GUI applications. And now watch when I run this application now. It says submit, but if I say hi and click, you see that it changes this, and that to something else completely different. Okay, so it's very interactive, and nothing happens here until you do something to it, until an event is occurred. Okay, that's why it's called GUI application, right? So that's the fun part. So this is how you read input. I read input from the text box, and I output back to the text any object that has a dot text. So notice the button has the word submit. This is the default, right? Because we put it here by default. And when I run it, it changes to done. So that's only runtime. It's not permanent. So I could also read the data from the button if I want to. I can do something like this. I would say string, just say message, something from the button. You say btn submit dot text. And it should say submit because that's the text that I have. And I could output that to, let's say, word plus, maybe not world, but plus the message. I'm just having fun here to show you how flexible it is you can do with this program here. I have reading two inputs here. One is directly from the button, has the text called submit. Read that into another variable, and then just output right back into the text box. Okay? And then now you see that when I click hi, it adds it right in here. Okay? So very easy, and just be careful when you read this from. So far we learned how to read text. Again, everything comes in as text. Okay? everything goes out must also be text. So all of these are all text only. Cannot be any other type. Must be only text, because text comes in, text go out. Inside your code, you can change things around. You can change like Boolean, integer, float number, string, doesn't matter. But when you send it back out, it's going to be converted to text automatically. Okay? If it's a number, then the number needs to be changed to text as well. So the next thing I want to do is, now what if I want to read numbers instead of text? And this form here tells me nothing much other than enter a word. That is the instruction you tell a user, but it doesn't mean that you cannot put text and numbers there, right? You can. And later on, I will show you how you can restrict that button, that input box, so it can only accept words, characters, or numbers. Okay, you can do that as well. You can force it, just like in a web page. But for now, let's just say that I'm going to enter not a word but a number, and you do some calculation, and then you output the result back down here. I'm sure you did something already with Professor Saad, but let's do this again, okay? So I read something here. I'm expecting this to be a number. So back in my code, I can leave these as is. Well, let's clean these up. That's fine. I'll leave it as is. It's nothing wrong here. So it's gonna read it to the word anyway. I'll get this as well. But I'm gonna create a new one here. This is gonna be of type integer, and I'll put here num1. I'll be reading that directly from the input text box. So same thing, just like this. So it'll be txt input, because that's the only place that read data. Again, it has to be text, right? And right away you notice that there's an error already, because I'm reading text or string to an integer. And we learned last week that you cannot do that, right? So you have to convert it. Does anybody remember how to convert that to an integer? Excellent, yep. Correct. So you convert this to n32.parse, and then I'm going to parse the whole thing, the whole input, to integer. Okay? And this is one way. The other way, what's the other way? Do you remember the second method? There are two of them, and you can use either one.
Convert to int.
Yeah. Super. You guys are awesome. So you can use that. You can go convert, right? The convert class to n32. Okay, so either one will convert to integer. And if you want to use a double instead, then just convert to, double and things like that, right? Some people like it this way. I don't know. Some like the other way. Either way is fine. I think if I go n32 double something dot parse, it's easier for me that way, but either way will be fine. So now we got the number converted to number 1, and then I can do a calculation of some sort. I can say, okay, now total is equal to num1 times itself, right? I could do this is a square. And then I need to output total to, I'm going to put to the actual message here, okay? So I'm going to turn these off here because these don't make sense. So let's remove these down here. So the output message will not be word, but it will be total. So replace that with total. Okay, so we have a problem there now. So again, I mentioned that the output must be text or string. And because this is text, it's expecting text, but I'm getting an integer. So what do? Right? Conversion again. Conversion. If it's just number only, you have to convert. If you put number plus like a string, then you don't have to. Okay, you don't have to, because this string here takes precedence. It will override whatever it is you're adding to. This add here, if it's a number like 6, then yeah, the whole thing needs to be converted because it's a number. But as long as you put like a string in there, then the whole thing becomes a string by default. So it's kind of tricky, but just remember that if you do something, you output, it doesn't take it, yeah, they make you do it. Unlike, PHP or JavaScript, that happens automatically, but unfortunately here you have to convert. So to convert to string, you would use the function called dot to string. It's a function. Okay? So every number that you output by itself to a text box, you have to convert to a string first before you can print it out. And this is the same thing as going from the string to number, but now you're going from number to string. It's using a function. And this is just temporary, so the total will always still be going to be integer. We're just temporarily converting string total to string here, so you can be outputted to the message here. So if I save that, and now let's run it. So notice also that we did not do any validation. If I happen to type a letter here, it's going to fail because I'm expecting a number, right? But let's just assume that we enter a number only. So, and if I put 5, hit enter, and you see the result is now 25 because 5 times 5 is 25. Okay? If I put a letter A, then I get an error. Okay? So you can continue or quit, and then it will ignore that because if you click continue, usually it crashes your program. And later on, when we learn about error handling, you will have to handle this very gracefully so that your user don't freak out. Okay, so again, only numbers, and that works fine. And then the next thing is, let's just say that, okay, I want this number to be displayed as, dollars. Not just this number, but dollar values. Okay, and how do you do that? So there are a couple of ways to do that. And one way, the easiest way, which I will show you, is also recommended to just do this way, is to put right in here, inside this function toString here, if it's a number, if this is a number, okay, and you want to format the number to have a dollar sign. So this is the easier way is you put in here a string character with the letter C, either uppercase or lowercase, it doesn't matter. The letter C here stands for currency. Okay, so what that will give you is it will automatically give you the dollar sign. And then followed by the second number, the second character is a number. This number represents the decimal place. Okay, so by default, it will always be a 2 decimal place. If you don't put the number there, if you just put C, it will use number 2 as a default. If you want to force it to be a different decimal place, like 4 decimal places, you put that there. Okay, so let's just say I use 4 decimal places. If I save that and run that program now, I enter 5, and you see that it's now $25 with 0.0000 cents. Okay, so this is the easiest way to convert to dollar output. Right? The other way is the harder way, if you want to do, which I don't recommend, but of course it can be done, is to explicitly put a dollar sign here, and then you plus that, right? And then you have to deal with the decimal place still. Okay, so if you do that, you still got a dollar sign because it's a string. So sometimes you have to do this, sometimes you just convert it right away. It's easier. And then right in here, there's another option. So I'll put a note here. This is for formatting numbers. Okay, I put some notes here. You can see C is for currency, int is for numbers, just regular numbers, and then we have a P for percent. Okay, so those three are it can be used. If you don't put anything there, it'll be default to just a string, just numbers without a decimal place. So if I want to output the same outputs before using the dollar sign I did here explicitly, then I need to convert this to number. So you can say put here n, and I want 2 decimal places, right? So the number 2 here, again, decimal places. And I explicitly put a dollar sign here. So, so why would I do that? Well, there's a reason you may want to do that. And I'll explain in a minute. So now if I run this application, and if I put again here, 55, you see that it looks very similar to the output before. I get the same result, except I did a little bit more than what I did in the other time, right? The dollar sign, I did it explicitly. I convert the numbers to a number with the comma and a decimal points. So it looks really beautifully. If you don't format this, it would just say 3025. And the reason why you do this way is because what if you want to use a different currency instead of dollar signs? What if you put like yen or a euro symbols, things like that, right? So you put that, replace the dollar sign, because if you use currency, it will also be a dollar sign. And of course, there are other ways you can convert it to a very specific language, currency. But this is one way. So shortcut is just put here. Okay, much shorter, and it handles very beautifully. So percent is the same thing. You put a P here, and you get a percent. Lowercase, uppercase, doesn't matter. Just remember that whatever you get a result, it will add 2 decimal places to the right. So you have to convert first, right? You do a division of some sort, get the percent value in decimal places, and it will convert. So in this example, if I just put P2 here, and I run, you see that put like 5. 5 times 5 is 25, and you get 2,500%, because it moved the decimal places to the right, right? It's always 2 places. And so correctly, you have to do the conversion first as a dot, right? And then it will add that for you. So this P2 here will multiply your result by 100, and then it put the percent sign at the end. So really helpful. These three arguments here are used for that purpose. Okay, any questions? So just remember, when you convert to the type you want, and then after that, you can do all your data processing here just like before, right? However you do it, you put it here. So if you want to try and go back to Unit 1, where you did all those flow charts examples, and try to convert those into the GUI application and see how those will work out. Okay. Okay, so we see that I'm reading number 1 and number 1 by itself, and so typically you have what is this? You have 2 buttons or some two things, right? So instead of just one input, you will probably have 2 or 3 or 4. And let's just say that I have another one down here. I'm going to move this a little bit down, and let me add another one here. Let's control click drag, okay, something like that. And then this is a new text box, so I copied it. The reason why I do that is because I have the same format, right? I already designed it. Everything looks good. I like it that way. Then just make a copy, and then I have to go back and change the name to something else. So let's just say this is input 2, txt input 2, and I use that as input 2 and input 1. And then my button here probably doesn't make sense to put it here. You can make it really big like this, or below it. I'm sure you see how websites work. It will be very similar. So I can change this to have, whatever meaning I want to do here. This could be like a, some number in a number, and you can do some calculation of some sort. So let's say I have 2 boxes, and you read from this and that into 2 different variables. And then I click submit, right? So same thing. I click submit. Now I have 2 options. I have the text input. I have the text 2 input as well. Text input 2 is another one. So you can read that, like for example down here. You can copy this, and again I'm assuming I'm only do numbers. So I could put like the num2 coming from the text input 2, and then now num1 times num2, and I get the result same as before. So right, usually you do this way so that it makes more sense. Then when you run it, you have 2 boxes like 5 and 6. Okay, I'm using percentage still. And let's put this back to, let's see. So just make sure you understand how to read input and how to output data. This is a really crucial part in the course. I have a lot of students in the past who got lost at this point because it gets tricky because you're dealing with a lot of code, and then at the same time you're dealing with something is graphical, and some students just don't get it. So if you're still confused how this works, please rewatch this video or ask me, and I can always explain more if you need to know more about it. But it's, as you can see, it's pretty straightforward, right? You got your output here, your design. When you read it, what do you do? Okay, these text box here, all of these here, as you can see, if I move it, right, you can always undo, Control Z, undo it, or you can lock it so that they can't be moved. And I think if you just do a right click on it and just say lock, so you see the little lock icon here. So now it's safe, so you cannot accidentally move them. It's also really good if you have everything here you like the way you like it, and you don't want to accidentally remove them or move them around. You can go through each one, or you can just do Control A, select all of them, and just lock them. Okay, lock or unlock. You can see I lock all of them. Okay, and then now all these are safe. I can't move them anymore. And if you want to remove, unlock them again, you can move them or resize or whatever. Even the form is locked, right? So you can also prevent this box here so that user cannot input data. Maybe because you want to show the user that, okay, this form here, this field has some number in it. Like for example, some default value. If I click on it, go to the text, and let's just say the default is 5. I want that to be 5, and I don't want them to be able to edit this number. Because right now, if I run it, you see that it's editable, right? I can change it, right? So if you want to lock it, you can, again, go to the properties down here, and there should be a property called enable or something. Yeah, if you put, I think this is like enable here, true to false. Let's see if that's the one. There's a lot of properties. Yeah, so you can see that if you turn the enabled to true, but false, you see that it's now locked. It's grayed out. They can see it, but they cannot change it. So if that's something that is important, lock it up so they can't see it. Okay. If it's locked, it doesn't mean that you cannot modify in the code. You can still, because you have a lot of control in the code. You can control it. You can write the code to change its value programmatically, but you just can't do it from the form here. Because any of this can be locked. And you can see if I click the lock here, the enabled property says false. Right? You can do that in the code as well. Maybe like after I click the submit button, I want to disable this or the button. Maybe you only want the user to only submit one time. After the submit button, I want that to be turned off. So you can say, okay, I'm going to go down here. After you click the submit button, when everything's all done, I want the button to be turned off. So btn submit enable is false. You set it to false. It's a false, true and false value. And then that's it. You can turn off everything else as well. Just use the enable property to false, and all of those will be turned off. So now so the first time around it's still there. It's functional. When I click on it, it's now locked. I can do whatever I want. It won't submit anymore. Okay, so those little things are really helpful. So you don't need to like counter, oh, they clicked once, they clicked twice. You don't really care. Once it's clicked, it's locked. Okay, so very handy. And again, you can do in the code this way, or sometimes when you initialize your app, you can initialize it right away by going to your properties and do here. These are usually used for initialization only. And after that, you can always change it in the code. You have total control of that. So all those properties can be accessed in the code. All these here. Everything you see here, pretty much all of them can be changed, except for the name. This you cannot change. But all these down here can be changed to whatever values they allow you to. So if you're not sure what they are, come to here, the properties, and look at these and see what the options are. Right? The background color, you can do that as well, programmatically, and so on. So you saw that you read the data here and output right down here. So we did like kind of like two steps. I put my data, submit. It goes into the submit form here, button control. I read your input to another variable, like 1 and 2 here. I do my calculation and output right back to the other message box down here. So if these numbers like 1 and 2 here are important, if they are important, meaning if you are going to reuse them again like this, or maybe somewhere else down the code, you can reuse them again. Yeah, read them into a variable like this. If you don't want to use them at all, you just want to use it one time, and if you don't want to use the variable, you can do directly right into the output here. Of course, it's much more confusing. I don't recommend it, but you can just put this convert here directly to this part here. And then, this one here, this whole string so it looks kind of ugly. This string here multiplies this and then toString, so that you don't have to do this initialization here at all. So I'm just saying you can go directly from here and then 2 here, right? Without reading any variable. But that's when you get better. Okay, when you're better, you know exactly what you're doing, and it's not confusing. You can do that. But for now, just read every variable, every control to a variable, and then do something with those variables like that. Okay. Yeah, this is the important part: the reading input and the output. Okay, so notice I'm moving to the right. I mean, move from the right side of the equal sign to the left side. Okay, this is reading the right side. Outputting is going to the left side. And the rest are just like for like design purposes, right? The color background, font size, all these other events. One thing also I want to show you that again, all of these here, everything you see here, every object you see here has an event. So this is lightning bolt here. So for example, this button, we add one event. If you click the button, you go to the lightning bolt, you'll see that if you scroll up and down, you see there's only one that has the event called the click event. And the click event has a function called btn submit click. That's the one that C# created automatically for you. You can also do so that when you mouse over the button, it submits it. So you can go down here to the button that says either mouse enter or mouse hover. I can do the mouse hover here. Okay, I click the mouse hover, and then the drop down, I can choose one of these functions here. The one that I have is called the button click submit. So if I click that, so now it has the hover and the click. But it wouldn't make sense because hover is going to take over. But let's just say I have both of those. If I save it, okay, now if we go into my code, you see that it adds another, it didn't add it, but it knows it has 2 events. It should work for both of them because this function here ties to those events. And what are those events? Well, we saw on the list over there, or you see it's passed through this object here, which is why you need it here, okay? And so if I go back to the program and run it, just be careful because if I type something here and just mouse over it, right? I didn't click it, it does the calculation, right? So I didn't even click it. So you can do both, click or hover. And so you can have all those events associated with this button here or any of these things here. Maybe you can do something like, okay, when I put the cursor here, when I type something, also add the numbers to this field here. It's like duplicate that field. You can do that too. Okay, I'll show you that. It's very easy. So like this one here, it's an event. So what kind of event? Well, let's go and find out what they have. You have a click event. I have a keyboard, the key press right here. I have a key press event. I do a key up maybe. When I do a key up, then what I do? Oh, there's nothing there. So let's just say I double click this. So I have a function for that text box. So every object can have their own function. And then what kind of event I want to do with this one here? Okay, when I do a text change, it gives you a text change event, which is okay. When I change the text, same as the key press, then something happens. Every time I type something, it will trigger this function. So this function comes in here, and I'm going to output the data, whatever it is, to the second box down here, right? You can do that. So you can say, okay, that's the second text box. That is txt input2 dot text. I want that to be equal to exactly the first box, txt input dot text. I'm just basically copying what I typed in the first box. This is the first box going to the second box. As soon as I type something, it would do that. And that is the intent. So let's see, if I go here, if I type in something like 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, you see that it duplicates that automatically because when I type something, it changes right away. So all these events can be added to your objects, and you can see how fun this can be. Okay, when I do something like that, I'm not limited to just one here. I can change all these things about my form here as soon as I make a change here. Again, the fun part is when you get a chance to go to the code and do the changes, the coding here. So when I type a character or something, what happens in here? Okay. You can do that. You can cause another button to automatically click. You can move things around. Later when we learn about animations and audio and video, you can do all of that. Play a video, move something on the screen. All those can be done programmatically, and those are pretty fun. So, which is why you can build games, all of the stuff with Visual C#. All right, so that is all I wanted to tell you now, and so I think that should be enough for you to do your homework. And we have 1 minute left, so I'm going to go over to the Unit 3 here and just talk about the assignment if you haven't already done it. If you did, awesome. So you'll be doing this assignment here. It's a really simple application to find out the total cost of a tax income. Okay, so you follow this flow chart here. So make sure you know what the flow chart is, right? How do you put that into a code? If you read it, it makes a lot of sense. So you're going to build the output first, right? Remember, what is it you're trying to do? And I put here some example of what that will look like. So you can build that to look something like this. If you want to be creative, build your own way, that's fine too. So basically, you need an input here, a button to calculate, and then you put the result down here. Again, it's in dollar, right? So make sure you format to dollar. And I put some notes down here to kind of assist you as well. So I look forward to see what you can do. And that's it. So tomorrow is lab day, and we'll have a quiz tomorrow. Just another short quiz. It will cover last week's topics. So it'll be pretty short, another maybe 3 or 5 questions. Okay, so I see you guys tomorrow, and have a good afternoon.